in our series of webinar seminars. Today's topic is going to be emails, tips, and tricks. I'm Rebecca Kraus, one of the Senior Solutions Engineers for Moxie, and I'm very excited to bring email to you today. If I go ahead here and we'll advance. A little bit of an agenda of what we're going to cover today. First of all, I want to start with a topic real briefly about email, and it's alive. When I get to that slide, you'll know what I'm referring to there. But, you know, it's really one of the workhorses of our digital communication channels and a little bit of an unsung hero. So we want to prop it up and give it some praise today on what a great channel option it is for you. And with that, that kind of plays into the automation and the time savings that that channel provides for you and how much, you know, that solution can provide to not only your customers, but to your agents and your staff as well. And then we'll dive into the areas that we've selected for our tips and tricks for today's session, which include email approvals, my favorite, variable content, and segmented content. So as we go through this, if you do have questions, again, feel free to use the chat section of the dialog box to submit those, and I'll try to save some time at the end to answer some of those questions as they come up. So without further ado, let me advance forward and we'll talk a little bit about it's alive. Again, email, you might not think it's as exciting, but I'm going to really argue that it is, you know, one of the foundational pieces of a digital communication journey with your customers. It's really about, you know, why is this channel the right channel at the right time for those customers? Email does continue to grow as a channel, so unlike some of the other channels that are out there that we have seen a decrease in the usage and acceptance of it by consumers, email does continue to grow from 58 to 68% over the last couple of years from some of the analyst studies that have been done. I think we'd all agree that from even a usability standpoint, the report that we saw shows 80% of us are reading our emails on our mobile devices. So it's really about providing that communication channel to where the customer is at the moment that the customer is there. Some of our consumers, to sort of understand how they're interpreting that channel and using it, 41% of the consumers that are submitting emails to your organizations are expecting you to reply within 6 hours of that communication. And again, some of that is going to go back to my next topic about automating some of these processes. But it's really about being able to support the customer because what we're finding is that only 36% of retailers are able to reply in that particular time frame. I think the other more important statistics on this particular page is the fact that 14% of companies don't even reply to emails at all. And obviously we would view that as a huge fail in that communication journey for our customers. I think the last piece on this is also the fact that email is a great channel and a great option for those secure communications that we want to have, whether it's a financial services conversation or, you know, e-commerce that's a more complex process and multifaceted. Email is a great option to be able to do that research as we're responding to customers. Moving along, I promise you just one more benefit slide, and then I'll get to the tips and tricks. But I think it's good to review and to remember why is it that we want to have email management, and why is, you know, email such an important part of our organization. I think for those of us that are dealing with customers, you know, that have more than 1,000 emails, or we want to be able to look at the history of my communication. I want to be able to know that the best agent is responding to the customer based on the product or the service or the type of question. And these are the automation points that Moxie Email Management has provided to you, and hopefully refreshing some of those areas are going to help us improve that process. And that could include things like auto acknowledgement. So again, hitting those desirable target metrics that customers have of how quickly are we going to respond to the customer. It might be being able to route the emails, again, to the best agent. Being able to view the history of all my previous conversations. And then obviously being able to report on those metrics to know how well have we done, are we hitting our service levels, have we met those requirements. So moving forward, all of those pieces, though, are great for us, but it's really about remembering the right channel at the right time for that customer. We don't want to, whether it's, I know we spend a lot of time talking about chat, but even with email, we don't want to take the customer off of their journey. We don't want to send them somewhere else to be able to get that assistance or that help. So it's really about keeping your customers on your website and allowing them to connect with you with the channel of their choice at that moment. And in this case, we're going to argue that it's email. Achieving that satisfaction for the customers is by offering them web forms to help the customer fill out what the request is that they have of you or the inquiry that they have of you, and then being able to keep them on your page through a web form versus redirecting them to an email app and sending them out of your off of your property or off of your page. Because again, you want to keep them shopping, you want to keep them in their account balance, in their account history, and not have to send them somewhere else. So without further ado, let me go ahead and start with the first tip and trick that we have for today, which is about email approval. And several reasons why we would have or need email approval might be about onboarding new employees. It might be seasonal staff that we're bringing in, or just an expansion of a new product or service and wanting to ensure that we have the consistency, we have the same conversation, no matter who within the organization that they connect with. It might also be for meeting compliance departments and auditing departments' regulations. I might be an ISO organization and I have to be audited and validate that we're communicating in the appropriate manner. This is something that email approval can assist you with by a couple different ways. You can set your emails up based on the mailbox, based on the role and or user, and based on the keywords within that email. So we'll just sort of review and highlight how do we set that up and how do we make that happen for our organization. On the left side of your screen, you've got an example of the mailbox settings. So about halfway through the mailbox settings is the option for enabling approvals. And in both email, mailboxes, and user and role settings, it is a percentage based. So I can say sort of a variable of I want 5%, 10%. Maybe Rebecca, is new and she's onboarded and you want to take 25% of what I'm doing in order to monitor my communications. So you can come in to the mailbox settings, again, on the mailbox side on the left, and define the percentage that you'd like to take. You can also say any email that has an attachment, I automatically want to approve it because we don't normally send those out. So if we're sending something out, there must be something specific about why we need to do that. On the right side is an example of what the role-based settings would be like. Similarly for the user is that you would go ahead and say that you want to go ahead and enable the approvals and then what percentage of those emails that you want to take. Moving forward is the email keyword list. So again, another option might be based on certain keywords or phrases that are used within the email replies, that triggers that particular email for needing approval. This might be salty, colorful language used by the agents. It might be based on sort of litigious words that are used within the email. Again, those words can be defined by you. You would go ahead and create your word list, and then in the words to add, you would put in those words that you'd like to add and then hit the add to word list, and it's going to go ahead and add those in. Additionally, if that compliance or auditing department had a specific, trigger words that they were looking for, you could import that text file in here as well so that you don't have to recreate it. Finally then, from an approval standpoint, once those rules have been set up in place, is that the supervisor can come into the email approval dashboard. Again, this could be by mailbox, that I'm responsible for this product line, so I'm going to approve all emails around that. Perhaps based on department, that these are the mailboxes that fall within my jurisdiction. As the supervisor, I could go ahead and review the original email. I could review the reply that was crafted by my agent, any notes or history about my communications with this customer. And I then can go ahead and approve that email or disapprove that email. Now this example that I'm showing you is off of the supervisor dashboard, where the supervisor would manually accept those emails for approval. You can set up the auto feed for email approval so that it will go ahead and auto feed to the supervisor's email reply editor from the email dashboard, and they can go ahead and approve from there as well. So again, two different options depending on what makes most sense for your particular organization. But again, that's an example of our first tip, which is email approvals. So moving on to our second tip is variable content. And I know content and categories can't be that exciting, but I really do like this one, and I think this is a very valuable one that if you're not taking advantage of it, hopefully after today you're going to run back to your admin console and add it back in. But variable content allows you, categories are great. They can grab them, they can add them into the emails, both your headers and your footers, and those body sections. But a lot of times people say, oh, each one is unique and specific and the agent has to craft it. And I would argue that, that may be true in some cases, but there are probably 4 or 5 examples where you do get a similar type of question. It's just that specifics of how you respond are unique to the customer. And that's where the variable content will come into play to help you set up that consistency and set up that standard of a response, but then allow the agent to put the variables in that are specific to the conversation. So how do I go about doing that? So the first step is to create content. So within, again, your admin console, where I go to create a new category, the last field at the very end here allows you to insert variables. So typically, I think I see a lot of organizations where they are using the, agent signature, so it will populate with the personalized signature for that agent, or it might insert the, Dear Rebecca, based on using the variable from the incoming email message. But what a lot of organizations don't necessarily do is that you can also create your own placeholders so that you can go ahead and customize that for, each email response you're replying to. So if you go ahead and take the Insert Placeholders option, which again is the last button at the category section, and then Insert Placeholders, what you'll see is it's going to give you a pop-up screen that allows you to essentially define what that placeholder is going to be. That placeholder can be a list of selection choices, or it can just be a text field. Again, depending on the situation, you might have a combination out there in your group. You're going to give that placeholder a name, again, define whether it's a list or text, and then in the case of a list, go ahead and put in what are the variables or the values that you want to be able to select from. You'd put those into the value field and then hit the add, and then it's going to show up at the bottom of that input box. Once you're done, you go ahead and take the insert field, and there you go. You see it's been added into my category. You can see the placeholder. You can see I called it reset type, and then you can see the description, and then you can see the choices in the list are going to be portal reset, email reset, application reset. If you keep reading, you'll see that I also added a second placeholder, and in this case, it's just a temp text box for the actual password reset. So it's got the placeholder, I called it temp p-word, description I called temporary password, and then it's a text box. So then when your agent goes ahead to use that particular variable, what you'll see is here I've inserted that text or that category into my email reply editor, and they can go ahead for the ones that are list, they can go ahead and select from the list of choices I selected, and then the fill is next to that, and they would go ahead and input that text box with the value for that particular variable. So my example here was, about resetting a password for depending on the different systems I might have. But it could be that they've asked about, what's the status of my order? I might have a consistent response, and then I might have a drop down of a list that says, it's in pre-production, it's in production, it's in post-production, it's shipping, and then maybe the field is going to be the estimated delivery date or the estimated end date. If it's a financial services situation, it might be a case where, I'm checking on a balance or a credit I was expecting. And again, I could have a standard set of text, and we could say, this credit's been approved or it's been disapproved, or these are the reasons why we did a certain thing. Again, the value to you as an organization is that, a supervisor can maintain consistency of responses and how we word that phrasing. From an agent side, it's certainly a time saver because of the fact that I don't have to recreate that every time I have a situation like this. And that category can be either filled in through workflow. I can hit the categories button and select it from a list, or I can use the quick code and fill it in within the field directly so that it populates into the email. Excuse me. But I think just as important as creating that content is evaluating the efficiency of the content. I think that what we see from a best practices standpoint, we come into organizations that, have been using our email management system for a while, and they don't really know what categories or contents are being used. They just know they have a lot of it. Agents may have even resorted to creating cheat sheets, in a text file or a Word document that they copy and paste in. And I think that's why it's important to run the email category report, which is one of the out-of-the-boxes reports, on a quarterly, twice-a-year basis. Let's evaluate how well is the content being used. I can see sort of what's been inserted based on our workflow scripts, or what's been used based on the agent selecting it. If I start to see content that's not being used, it, as an administrator, gives me the opportunity to go through and say, hey, do I need to tweak this? Do I need to add to it, change to it? Or maybe we need to remove it from the system altogether. So again, sort of closing the loop on using the content is that we also then report against it to make sure that it is meaningful and valuable to my agents. And last but not least on the content, I'm calling this one my extra credit step on this tip, is the fact that for inserting the content, again, we talked about we can do it via the category button. I can use a quick code. The workflow could insert it. But you can also use your right mouse button. So if you click your right mouse button, categories is one of the options there to allow me to go ahead and insert. But if you are also leveraging Moxie's knowledge base, that's also a quick way to insert knowledge base content or URLs directly into the email as well. So again, it's just another time-saving tip that my agents can use to sort of quickly and easily move through the solution. So that wraps up, as I said, my favorite tip on the variable content. But sticking with the theme of content and sort of what I talked about with, agents saying, oh, there's just so much there. I filtered or I searched, but I couldn't find what I was looking for, is using the content segmentation by queue or by mailbox. It allows you to organize the content so agents are only seeing that which is applicable to them for their products or their services that they are supporting. It also makes it easier for them to find the right answer at the right time versus having to scroll through and filter through a bunch of different possible choices. You can assign content based on the role of the user, based on the agent, or based on the mailbox that this is related to. So just to review how we do that, the first one is I'm still within my admin panel, within the categories section. And so the first tab here is categories, where I created the categories. The next tab is mailboxes, and so that would be the first option, is that I can use the custom access list that would show me all the mailboxes, and I can then check which mailboxes do I want this content to be applicable to and available for use or visibility. The next step or option is the user or role-based assignment, and so that's the third tab, again, within category creation for management. And then here, the first tab, when I bring up the access list, would show me all the users, and then the second tab is for all the roles that are assigned there. Now, from a best practices standpoint, again, we would recommend using the roles over the users. If I have a smaller organization, you know, doing it at the user level probably isn't that problematic because I can probably manage it. But as my organization continues to grow, it'll be harder to manage that, and so we'd want to go ahead and manage that at the role level. So might as well start out that way and know we're going to grow big and do it at the role level because it'll be easier from an administration and management standpoint. So that sort of brings me back to the beginning, or the end, as they say, on the email management. Again, I think that email is my workhorse of my digital channels, but it's really about presenting it to the consumer at the right time and in the right context, allowing them to submit that via a web form versus redirecting them off of the website. And then again, the tips and tricks we went through. Hopefully there were one or two things that you're not taking advantage of that you can apply to your particular environment, whether it's around email approvals, my favorite, variable content, or the segmentation of the content. So let me remind everybody that I have recorded the presentation and it will be available via our website. Let me go ahead and check the chat text box and see if we have any questions that were submitted. We've got a few minutes left in our time together this morning, and we can go ahead and get those answered. All right, I do have one here that came in, and they asked, as the supervisor, what happens if I'm unavailable to approve the emails? Which is a great question. I showed you the email approval dashboard, and we talked about the supervisor being able to pull it from there or have it routed to them into the email editor. But if I'm not there, you know, what happens? So you can use scheduled workflow, and you can set the workflow to either automatically approve emails that have been waiting or automatically disapprove emails that are waiting. So again, the workflow could go ahead and control that so that if I'm out for the day or I'm on PTO, that we could go ahead and do that. Typically, though, I might have somebody else who's responsible for approving in my absence, but that's another option. I think the only other thing around approvals that I would remind people is that approvals for the workflow that we've talked about, you need to have also set your email system mailbox settings to be checked to accept the workflow. So that would be the only other tidbit around that I would remind folks. Let's see if we have any others that have come in. You know what, that looks like the only other one I have right now, and we are almost to the end of our time together. So I want to thank everybody for being a great audience. If this triggered some more questions for you, that I always say my best questions come 5 minutes after my meeting. So feel free to contact your RSM, and they will get you in touch with one of our engineers to talk through any additional questions. But thank you again, everybody, for your time today, and have a great morning.